Shapiro argues that despite all of our societal issues, despite all of our societal ills, the one thing that will destroy America is wokeism. Let's watch.
So tonight, we're gonna talk about how wokeness is destroying America. And here's the thing. A lot of members of the left are starting to realize that wokeness is destroying America. The problem with wokeness is that, bottom line, it promulgates lies. In particular, it promulgates 4 sets of lies. It promulgates lies about the nature of the United States. It promulgates lies about the nature of inequality. It promulgates lies about the nature of responsibility. And finally, it promulgates lies about the nature of truth itself.
Now, I debated Ben Shapiro before the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, and we have some agreements in regard to so-called wokeism. We have some pretty significant disagreements as well. And I just wanted to respond to like the whole theme of his wokeism speech by saying, look, you could be annoyed with wokeism. You could have your thoughts on that, and I've shared my thoughts on it. But to say that wokeism is what's destroying America is just a weird thing to say. Because there's a lot going on in this country right now. A lot that's causing pain and suffering among our fellow Americans that has nothing to do with the culture wars. In fact, a headline from today that was jarring and I wish got a lot more attention. 100,000 Americans died of drug overdoses in 12 months during the pandemic. That's a record. 100,000 Americans dead from drug overdoses. These are deaths of despair. These are people who are addicted to opioids, thanks to a lot of help from pharmaceutical companies pushing painkillers. I mean, that's a lot of people. You look at the body of this piece, the New York Times reporting on it. The people who died, 275 every day, would fill the stadium where the University of Alabama plays football. Together, they equal the population of Roanoke, Virginia. But here's what's also jarring. The new figures, which are provisional but rarely change much in final tallies, represents a 28.5% increase from the same period a year earlier. Here's the relevant part. The financial, mental health, housing, and other difficulties of the COVID-19 pandemic are widely blamed for much of the increase. So on one hand, we've got wokeism, which can be annoying, can have some unintended consequences by people who I think have good intentions. I think want equality of opportunities, But to say that that is the one thing that's destroying America, I just, like, hyperbole doesn't even cover how ridiculous that statement is, okay? You have people literally sleeping and dying on the streets, 60,000 of whom are living and dying on the streets of Los Angeles County alone. Okay, so there are real economic issues, and I just want to get to a point in this country where we focus on that. But it's really hard to do it when all you've got on the right is nonstop fear-mongering about culture war issues. By the way, women haven't been able to get back to the workforce. Even when they want to go back to work, they can't do it. They don't have childcare. Some schools are still closed. They can't afford childcare because they've been paid insanely low wages their entire working lives. Maybe talk about those issues, but no, it's wokeism. The real problem in this country is teaching about racism in our public schools. That's what's destroying America. Anyway, let's get to the second video because he does give specific examples of what he means, and I respect that. I tend to disagree with his diagnosis here, right? Because there was one moment where he finally got into economic issues, which I love, awesome. And get a load of his perspective on meritocracy. I think there's this myth of meritocracy in this country, but he's pushing it along with this notion of personal responsibility. So let's take a look at that.
Any system that rewards skills has excellent externalities for third parties. In any society, some people are going to be rewarded and some people are not going to be rewarded as much. The question is, what metric do you use in order to delegate who is rewarded and who is not? Presumably, as a society, we would like to reward people such that the externalities of their activities make our lives better. That's why we reward Bill Gates for creating Windows. That's why we reward Elon Musk for making Tesla. Right? The system rewards that labor specifically because it makes a lot of people, it makes their lives better and it makes their lives easier.
So, he gives this example of people who have been incredibly successful in this capitalist economy. Elon Musk was one of them. But to leave out how much government aid people like Elon Musk have taken advantage of, I think is unfair and wrong. So for instance, here's just one headline. This is coming from TechCrunch on June 23rd of 2009. The government comes through for Tesla with a $465 million loan for its electric sedan. But by the way, that's just one example of the government coming to the aid of Elon Musk. I'm curious to see how Elon Musk would perform without all the help he got from the federal government to launch his business and to sustain his business. Let me give you more. This is from the New Republic. A 2015 Los Angeles Times investigation estimated that Tesla, Solar City, and SpaceX had together benefited from $4.9 billion in government support. That included, for example, a $465 million low interest loan from the Department of Energy in 2010 that helped Tesla ride out the effects of the Great Recession. Since then, Texas's Travis County has offered a $14.7 million at minimum tax break for the building of a Tesla factory. A Nevada factory was built on the promise of up to $1.3 billion in tax benefits over 2 decades. So listen, if you want to commend someone like Elon Musk for being a visionary, for having ideas that were revolutionary, you want to make that point, that's fine. I certainly have my disagreements with Elon Musk, but I'm not going to minimize what he has thought about doing and what he has accomplished, but you also have to acknowledge how much help he's gotten from the federal government. Because let me tell you something, ordinary Americans, they're looking to start a business. It's a lot harder to get capital like that from the federal government. And it's incredibly hard to get approved for a business loan. So, it's that saying, like people who think they're, people who are like born on second base and they thought they hit a double. I mean, it's just another example of that. Just be honest about how the government plays a role in not only subsidizing these private companies, but more importantly, in providing the seed money when they try to get these ventures started. And that's certainly what happened with Tesla. Moving on. I also want to talk about the myth of meritocracy in this country. Now, I'll give you a specific example to reinforce the point I'm trying to make here. I believe Ben Shapiro went to Harvard, okay? Smart guy, went to an Ivy League school. But I think that there's a misconception about how people who get accepted into these institutions are the brightest, the smartest, the best of the best. I don't know if that's the case with Ben Shapiro. I'm not gonna get into his personal merit, but I am gonna get into a study that was done by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and they looked at the admissions over at Harvard specifically. Here's what they found. Among white people who have been admitted to the university, over 45% are ALDC. Okay, you might be wondering, what is ALDC? Well, that includes people who have been accepted for things like legacy admissions, people who got a scholarship because of a sport that they engage in, also people who have gotten admitted because someone in their family has made a massive donation. So that's what they're referring to when they mention ALDC people who have been admitted to Harvard, okay? Among admits who are African American, Asian American, and Hispanic, the share is less than 16% each. Our model of admission shows that roughly 3/4 of white ALDC admits would have been rejected if they had been treated as white non-ALDCs. So look, there's the racial component to it, right? But I like that they did this control. where they take out the legacy stuff, where they take out the sports, and where they take out donations to the university. Because all of a sudden you see the likelihood of these people getting admitted to the university drop significantly. Let me give you more. In addition to this, admissions preferences for ALDC applicants are substantial. We find that a white non-ALDC applicant with a 10% chance of admission would see a 5-fold increase in admissions likelihood if they were a legacy, more than a 7-fold increase if they were on the dean's interest list, and that they would be admitted with near certainty if they were a recruited athlete. So again, I really want to emphasize the point that meritocracy in this country is a myth. And I agree with Ben Shapiro, actually. There was a part in his speech where he talked about some schools doing away with the grading system because students are struggling. I don't agree with that. I don't think they should do that. I read a Los Angeles Times article about how teachers are like struggling right now because due to virtual learning, a lot of students are failing their classes. They don't know what to do. So they're going from a grade-based system to a pass or no pass. I disagree with that, sorry. So I actually happen to agree with Ben Shapiro on it. However, to then turn around and say, oh my God, wokeism is destroying our system of meritocracy is just a lie because that system does not exist. There is a system in place that overwhelmingly benefits the privileged. And when I say privileged, I'm talking about people who come from money. People whose mama and papa can donate, some money to the university. That plays a role in whether or not this Ivy League accepts you. End of story, right? And by the way, I do want to also mention that there's a specific reason why people like Ben Shapiro kind of shy away from economic issues and they really hone in on the culture war. Number one, everyone hates the culture war. Everyone does have an issue with, the scolding that takes place. Like, let's keep it real, all right? So the left has kind of become the scolders. The right loves it because that's all they want to talk about. And then in the meantime, the left is missing out on an opportunity to relentlessly attack the right on what they are the least popular on, and that's economic issues. The John Deere workers who are on strike, 40% of them identify as conservatives. And I just want to remind you all of why they're striking in the first place.
They wanted us to agree to do away with pensions for any new hires that came after us.
I'm not willing to sell out my future brothers and sisters that might be coming in here. Could be your kid, it could be the kid down the street. We're not interested in having our retirement plans in a Wall Street speculation portfolio. We want something guaranteed.
Corporations don't want to pay their employees a fair living wage with a fair cost of living increase. Instead, they want to shift that over to stockholders and the president, CEOs, and vice presidents.
Over the last year, our CEO's pay has gone up 160%.
They're projected to make between $5.7 and $5.9 billion in profits this year.
Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, leftist, doesn't matter. If you're a worker in this country, you're experiencing the same thing. And the policies that the right, I don't know what policies the right wing wants. The only thing they've been calling for is protecting corporate interests and cutting taxes. They love it. That's all they advocate for. If we could focus on hitting them where it hurts and also mock them for only relying on a culture war for their messaging and campaigning, I think that we might have a path to victory. But instead, we keep giving them content again and again, giving them stuff to, do these speeches on. I'm sure they get paid handsomely for these speeches. Focus on what they lose on. They lose people once they talk about their vision for the economy. They lose when they pretend that we live in a meritocracy. They lose when they point to American workers and say that if they're struggling and can't feed their families, it's their fault. They're not taking personal responsibility. He knows how capitalism works. I know he knows how capitalism works because I told him during my debate with him before the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce. Let's watch. As an employer, right? It's not that you have to be awful to your employees, but you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders to return, to provide a return on their investment. That's literally like it's baked into the system.
That's true.
And so as a result, I mean, what's the most expensive cost within a business?
It's always labor.
It's always labor.
We're also
so
in
when we
competition
talk
with other
about
people who pay.
exploitation, right? Exploitation always makes it seem like you're actively brutal and awful to your employees, which in some cases that does happen, but it doesn't even have to get that far. The whole point is to extract as much labor for the lowest possible price.
That can only happen in a
order to
monopolistic situation.
increase profits and provide a return of investment to your shareholders. That's just the way the system works.
That's right.
That is just the way the system works, and he knows it. And he'll say, no, the system works fine because, companies need to compete for labor. And when they compete for labor, that's when they increase wages. But pay close attention to how they're talking about the labor shortage right now. But more importantly, pay close attention to how they're talking about inflation right now. Oh, these higher wages, it's translating to inflation, these higher wages, because they don't want you to get paid higher wages. Hit them where it hurts, guys. It's easy. We just need to stay focused.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.